Welcome to the AUA News Inside Track podcast, an official podcast of the American Urological Association. Thanks for listening. For more episodes of this podcast, visit www.auanet.org/podcast.
Thank you for joining us today. This is the Young Urologists Committee podcast, Parenting and Urology. My name is Carmen Tong, and I am your podcast host today. I am the current chair of the AUA Young Urologists Committee and a pediatric urologist at the University of Alabama in Birmingham. I have the pleasure of introducing our two guests with me on the podcast, Dr. Christina Carpenter and Dr. Chloe Peters. Dr. Carpenter is the interim chief of the Division of Pediatric Urology at Columbia University. She previously completed her residency at Rutgers University, New Jersey Medical School, and then simultaneously completed her pediatric urology fellowship at Lebanon Children's Hospital and a Master of Science in Epidemiology at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center. Dr. Chloe Peters is currently a chief resident at the University of Washington. Prior to that, she did her medical school training at Duke University. Both of our speakers are part of the Society of Women in Urology Parenting Task Force. Welcome, Dr. Carpenter and Dr. Peters.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you very much for being here and sharing your expertise with us. I wanted to start off by asking, why are pregnancy and parenthood important topics for us to discuss?
All right, well, I'll start. It's important because as the priorities of our work life and parenting, our career and parenting haven't changed over the years. They just become, people are now putting much more value on prioritizing being a parent as much as being in their career. And thankfully, we're trying to find better ways of balancing the two.
This is a topic that affects everybody in urology. Obviously, it affects men and women in different ways. And we know that the years of training that we go through generally overlap with the prime reproductive years for a lot of people. So people want to have kids in training or beyond training. This is something that pretty much affects the whole workforce. And I'm sure a lot of people listening are aware of some of the data that's come out more recently in the last few years, looking at the higher rates of pregnancy complications, miscarriage, infertility, as that's quite high among surgeons. And some of that might be because people have kids later, but there are probably a lot of things that go into it. And so there are some unique needs that people have, especially around pregnancy, lactation, and parenting and beyond, that we really just need to talk about. The issues are not new. They're just sort of coming to the forefront in a stronger way in recent years.
And one of the things is I just meant to add, one of the things when you think of parenting and lactation and things like, pregnancy and lactation, you wouldn't normally think of just the females, but this really is an issue that affects the entire workforce, as Dr. Peters said, because even if it's not your partner, your partner in pregnancy or parenthood, it might be your partner in the workforce that is going through these things. So it requires everyone's commitment and support in order for us to be successful.
Mm-hmm. I think that brings up a great point, that parental leave and parenting, it's a two-person game, I feel like. And I like that, our language has changed from maternity leave to parental leave, because it really is both. So do you think there are any recommendations for parental leave that our field specifically should consider?
We should have it. That's the start, because the reality is that a shocking number of places still don't have parental leave policies. And many of the ones that do have unpaid leave, or people have to use short-term disability or things like that, they might not make RVU adjustments, which is especially problematic if you, have a pregnancy and then you're taking a period of time to physically recover from the trauma that is birth. And then you might not meet RVU targets. It can really impact people's salaries. So, in terms of duration, there's a lot of data that more time is good, recognizing that may or may not be feasible depending on your specific job. And it really should be gender neutral. So there's also data that men or partners of people who have babies if they take leave, it reduces rates of maternal postpartum depression and anxiety. And it leads to better relationship stability over time. And so you have lower divorce rates as well. So, if your partner has a kid, you should also take time off. And so I think, this is an issue that affects every single person. Most people need at minimum, 4 weeks for a vaginal delivery or 6 weeks after a C-section is kind of the medical recommendation, but you really need a lot more time than that.
Yeah, and in medicine, we typically are lagging behind technological advances and all those type of things. And there certainly are, fields like tech, like Google and Apple. They have really progressive paternity leaves and things like that. But there are still a lot of fields that have minimal to no paternity leave. So it would be great if in medicine or even in urology, we could be leaders in it and show why it's important and make these changes.
Yeah, when I hear about parental leave in other countries, I feel like the U.S. really lacks behind in terms of prioritizing family time, bonding time. And I know that certain states are also very different. For instance, California has much better parental leave protection for both men and women than other states. And so I just came across an article in JAMA that came out, I think, 2019, surveying physicians and parental leave. And one of the big things that came out of that survey was other things that weren't even considered, like having to take more call before and after parental leave, being punished for being gone by taking, having more responsibilities or having their pay cut in sort of mysterious ways. I was wondering if you have any tips or tricks for our young urologists that are listening and on how to have these conversations, either with their private practice group or in an academic institution, to protect themselves and protect their priorities.
I guess the only, so I had my first child after I graduated from all of my training. So I had my first child was in my third year of being an attending, and then I just had my daughter a year ago. So I don't really have any tips for in training, but perhaps Dr. Peters can speak to that. But I would just say, as a practicing urologist, just to be very vocal about what your expectations are and what you need. I was very fortunate to have a chairman who is progressive and really supportive. And though he may not have thought of these things as issues before, every time I brought them up to his attention, he was like, oh, wow, that is really important. And yeah, absolutely. Like, let's make that happen. So, I think it's easy to just sit back and kind of accept the way things are, because especially in medicine, we go through this very laid out for us track. And just because it has always been done this way doesn't mean it has to always be done this way. So really important to think about what you need, talk to other people about things that they would have wanted to have, and advocate for yourself to help make those changes.
Yeah. And people, as somebody who's looking at jobs, you should look at this stuff and talk to your future employer about this before you sign a contract. So ask about the parental leave policy and ask for what you would want, even if you are not currently pregnant. If that is even a possibility for you, then that should be discussed. And one of the things that we're doing as part of SWU is we're doing kind of a number of things to raise attention to this, but part of it is also to create some sort of templates or guidelines for creating new policies for people who don't have one in their department. Bringing research. So there's also data about taking overnight call, especially starting as early as 8 weeks, and there's sort of a proportional increase in your risk with the more call that you take, and it's just an unfortunate reality that we often have to take call during pregnancy. But especially later in pregnancy, there needs to be a backup plan, or I think exemptions. I'm fortunate to be at a training program where I didn't take call in my third trimester at all in my first pregnancy, and then I took a few weeknights during my second pregnancy in my third trimester, but stopped early because I had preterm contractions and ended up in L&D after being up all night. And so, when you can bring research that supports your arguments for why, pregnancy is a medical condition. And if you had cancer and went out for chemotherapy for a while and you came back, you wouldn't be expected to make up all that call. And so the fact that we often are expected to make up all of this call and you come back and all of a sudden you're on every third night and you have a newborn is kind of crazy. But it's also really hard because you know that it is a burden that has to be shared among coworkers. So having a policy up front, I think, is better than trying to figure all of this out as you go, recognizing what if you deliver early? Is there a backup plan for who's going to see your clinic patients, who's going to cover your ORs or things like that? When do you stop operating? Even things like radiation exposure, gemcitabine. Who's going to give the gemcitabine to your patients if you're pregnant? So there's a lot of things to consider. And the more you can sort of anticipate those up front, probably the easier things will be going forward.
And just to breach off of that, and Dr. Peters alluded to this, one of the great things that SUA is doing and what we're working on is trying to develop these policies and templates and to bring it to a centralized location so that we're not all just doing this in little silos across the country in our own little environments. But if we could help to make it more standardized and also try to work with the AUA as well, so then make it more widely publicized and popularized as well.
Mm-hmm. And as Dr. Carpenter said, just ask, because you never know. If you ask for lactation RVU credits, maybe you'll be able to get them. UCSF has a policy on that online that you can use as a reference, and you might be surprised.
And if you ask and you get denied, that might not be the place that you want to work. So it really helps to gauge the environment that you're signing up for.
Yeah.
Those are all really good points. I'm sure there are many urologist parents that are in practices and institutions where parental policies are either non-existent or very, very vague, probably on purpose. And it certainly is easier if there's already a policy set in place or clarified, just to at least give some ease about job security. And I'm sure it raises job satisfaction as well, being supported at work, which translates to happiness both at work and at home. So I think that's fabulous that SWU is really tackling on this very important topic. Can you talk a little bit about sort of things that lactating urologists need to consider in terms of pumping at work and accommodations, things that, maybe a first-time parent may not be thinking about that they should ask for?
Sure. So, again, I can't speak to like in training, but in practice, which, a lot of overlap, but one, you have to think about you're going to need, a private space. And, one of the default is for people to say like, oh, we have lactation rooms in our hospital. But like, for instance, where I did work, the lactation room is like a 15-minute walk away. Like, it's not realistic for me to go multiple times a day walking 15 minutes. I'm walking 15 minutes back. So, I right up front was like, well, that's not going to work for me. So I'm going to use one of the clinic rooms, twice a day. You need a place to store the milk. So you need like a refrigerator. Those are the things to ask from the institution. And then there is a lot of other things that go along with it. You need a pump, you need things like that. And, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm currently pumping. I have a 5-month-old, and I pumped for a year actually after my daughter was born. It's really, really hard to pump. And I think a lot of people, if you've never pumped, myself included, you have no idea what goes into it. And I think doing a little bit to just talk to your colleagues about what is involved is helpful. Like most of my co-residents, they just had no clue. You have to pump every 3 hours. And if you don't, it's incredibly painful. You can get clogs, you can get mastitis, your supply can go down. Like there are real consequences to that. And people just, they don't know. So a little bit of education, I think, goes a long way especially if you're in residency and you're stepping out of the OR or things like that. And touching base with maybe your attendings to say, hey, I'm going to have to pump around this time. Maybe, if there a good time in this procedure, I don't know, maybe you're doing a route, there's a lymph node dissection. Maybe that's a good time for me to step out because we did that yesterday and I feel better about that stage of the case or something like that, so that you sort of frame it early on in the day. I've used wearable pumps and non-wearable pumps, and I could spend a whole hour talking about the logistics of pumping. But, I think, like Dr. Carpenter mentioned, it's very easy to say, oh, we have all of these places for you to pump. The reality, also a lot of lactation rooms you have to sign up for in advance. They might have specific times. So you have to say, okay, I will reserve this room from 11 to 11:30. And all of us know that our schedules are just not that reliable. So your operation might go till 11:20 or 12 or 1. And you might just sort of miss your spot. So most of those don't work. I found success. Honestly, I often just take a privacy screen and I just put it by a corner desk and I pump in the workroom, and my co-residents are okay with that. You need to have a place where you have a computer usually so that you can do work, because it takes a lot of time. And it's not just the time pumping, it's the time to walk to the pumping place, to get your pumping supplies out of the fridge, to set all of it up, to actually pump, to take all of it down, to put your milk away, to walk back. The whole thing is a commitment. And so it's something that was really, really important to me. In a lot of ways, it felt like the only contribution that only I could make when my daughter was young, because I was absent for a lot of other things. So it was really, really important to me. And I was very grateful to have the support. And it's a protected right legally. And so, thinking through what is involved is not easy. A lot of trial and error. I put milk in urine cups because I forgot my Steri's chill store thing. And had all sorts of adventures with that. But it's something you can do. The wearable pumps can be used in the clinic and in the OR. They're not perfect, but there are options. So again, just advocating for yourself, which is not always easy.
And so, bridge off of I was just going to add, the advocating is if you're thinking of taking a job or you're looking at, what policies or allowances they have, I would make sure to set yourself up try to set yourself up for like the most that you might need. So, when I went out with my first, with my son, I, had this great idea that like, oh, it was going to be no big deal when I went back to work, when I was pumping, I was going to have those wearables and I was just going to be like bopping around and pumping at the same time. It was like going to be no big deal. But wearables don't work for me at all. So that's not an option for me. So, but I had no idea about that. So if I had like committed to that as being like, oh, well, I don't need to make RBU reductions, I don't need any time for pumping because I'm going to do this, I would have really set myself up for a lot more anxiety and stress and failure. So, so really make sure that you're asking for the things that you need. And then the other thing I was going to say is I really support what Dr. Peters is saying about trying to be as open and honest and educating the people around you. I often pump in my office, which is a shared office, and I have like this wrap thing, but I don't have a privacy screen. I just have a wrap thing, and I have medical students in there, I have residents in there, and I always say to them, like, I'm going to pump. I feel very comfortable with you being in here, but if it makes you uncomfortable, you are more than welcome to leave, and that is completely fine. And I haven't had one person yet that said that they were uncomfortable. They just said like, oh yeah, absolutely. Like, yeah, no problem. And I'm sure that isn't to say that there weren't people that were slightly uncomfortable, but I think the more that we normalize it is really important for, progress we're trying to make.
Yeah, I think those are all incredibly good points. To Dr. Peters's point, there is the Fair Labor Standards Act. I just looked it up because I couldn't remember what it's called, where hospitals have to comply in providing a quiet, safe space, preferably private space, away from bathrooms, for you to pump. And I feel like I oftentimes see a lot of lactating trainees pumping in the locker room right next to the bathroom. where there are a lot of people going in and out, the doors swing open, and it just makes me really cringe. And it's one of those things that I never thought to ask about when I was interviewing for a job. They give you a grand tour of the hospital. They show you the surgeon's lounge. They show you the women's locker room. They show you what the ORs look like, which we all know what ORs look like, but they never really show you where the lactation rooms are. And it's such a shame because a lot of times, like Dr. Carpenter said, they're really far away. And even having to go several floors down, waiting for the elevator to get to a room where you may have to sign up for a slot that you had just missed. It can be very challenging. And so I think that's such a good point to bring up, that having asked about the lactation rooms is very important. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Peters and Dr. Carpenter, for those excellent answers. Are there any other things that you'd like to share with us that SWU and you and the task force are working on that our listeners may want to look up and investigate?
Well, I would just say to look out for what we're going to be coming out with when this Parenthood Task Force, and all of the resources that we're hoping and going to deliver on to provide help trainees and practicing urologists to accomplish these goals of establishing parental policies at your institution, and lactation accommodations and pregnancy accommodation, so that we're not doing it alone and we can support each other.
And we really want to create a network for people. If you are in a group or at a program where nobody has ever been pregnant or nobody has ever had a kid before, it can be very, very scary and isolating. And honestly, the last thing you generally want to do, especially if you're pregnant and exhausted, is be the one creating this policy and doing all of that work and the advocating for yourself that we've just talked about. And so just talking to other people who've been through it is really helpful. And so hopefully SWU especially can kind of be a resource for connecting with other people who've been there. I know that was really, really valuable for me. And, I hope to be that for other people. And I know Dr. Carpenter as well hopes that. And so I think just creating a network. Urology is a small field, and this is something that we can do to support one another, even if we're not all in the same place.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Peters, Dr. Carpenter, for your time today. I know I certainly learned a lot about all the resources that are being provided by SWU and all of the great research and work that you guys are doing in this space. Dr. Peters and Dr. Carpenter are both writing a chapter for the AUA Young Urologists Committee, transitioning from residency to practice manual. So if you, the listener, have any sort of additional questions, want additional information or resources, please feel free to access the free transitioning manual that's available online on AUA. Thank you again to you both. I hope you have a lovely day.
This has been an AUA News Inside Track podcast. Thanks for listening. For more episodes of this podcast, visit www.auanet.org/podcast.